That's when we tell farmers we're going to model the forest, and we literally grow water. We can take areas that are dry, destitute, the soil's washing away. We don't plant trees right at the start. We plant, grasses and other shrubs. And then over time, it starts to bring back the water. So we can regenerate the earth. We can make it truly the garden. The question is, can we navigate the greatest distance in the world? As one indigenous elder told me from Greenland once, he said, John, the greatest distance in the world is between humanity's heart and humanity's brain. That's really where we're at today. We have all the solutions that are available for us, and some we still need to work on, but we really need to work on just being open.
Welcome to Nutrition Without Compromise, a podcast brought to you by Orlo Nutrition. We believe that nutrition shouldn't be an either or, that you should never have to sacrifice your morals for your health or that of our home planet. Join natural products veteran Corinna Bellizzi and experts from around the globe as they discuss healthy solutions that are better for you and better for the planet.
Welcome to another great episode of Nutrition Without Compromise. I'm your host, Corinna Bellizzi, and today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to a giant in the world of regenerative agroforestry. He's responsible for so much in this space, and that is John Roulac. John is a hemp innovator, serial entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist, and writer. As the 1999 founder of the organic superfoods brand Nutiva, he has sourced and formulated $1 billion in retail sales of organic superfoods in the past 20 years. He is also an executive producer of the Netflix blockbuster in the regenerative agriculture space called Kiss the Ground, which is narrated by Woody Harrelson. John has founded 6 nonprofit organizations, including Great Plains Regeneration, Agroforestry Regeneration Communities, ARC, and Forest Forever. John Roulac, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Corinna, on your show today.
It's just an honor to have you here. I've had the pleasure of interviewing people in the space of regenerative agriculture a few times on my other podcast, Care More Be Better, including our mutual friend, Paul Hawken. So I'd like to just get started here and first ask you, what does this concept of nutrition without compromise mean to you?
Well, it's a provocative name. I think nutrition is so important, and if you can do it without compromising, the planet or your health, I think that's very important.
Awesome. Now, you have been an environmentalist for what seems like your whole life. So I'd love to know what got you started as a young environmentalist.
Yeah, I would say two events set me on the path I am today. One, my parents were a bit different than most people. Some people collect cars or rare art or things like that. My parents decided to collect small remote islands. and so
Would that I have a collection of those?
Yeah. So my mom and dad bought a 3-acre island when I was just a little kid in the Pacific Northwest, and had no running water, no electricity. And so I spent a lot of time playing in the tide pools, playing among the tall trees, being in a very beautiful, lovely nature, as it was back in the 1960s. Things have degraded a lot, but things degraded, what it was in 1600 versus 1960. Still, it changed massively, and unfortunately, it's been for the worse of late. And then, so that definitely set me up to see things a little differently. We went there in the summers, and then during the rest of the year, I lived in the Pasadena, California area, which at the time had no pollution control systems in the 1960s. So it was hard to breathe. It's very smoggy, painful, just to breathe in oxygen. And so going
in the Pacific Northwest?
And then that was in Southern California.
Okay.
So so 10 miles from like downtown LA. So
Hmm.
10 months in a very polluted environment, 2 months in a very blissful, clean environment. And that difference, definitely juxtaposition, influenced me. And then when I was 21, unidentified truck driver dumped nuclear waste 9 miles from my house. And that really pissed me off when I was 21. And back then we didn't have the internet, but we had a lot of people listen to radio, and the radio DJ talked about it every day, I think for a week. And so that set me on my life journey, was how do we live on this planet in an ecological way, and in a more healthy way. And I combined that with business and campaigns, and 40 plus years later, here I am. Here we
Yeah,
are.
well, you've spent a long time working in the natural channel, like myself, and ultimately building responsible food brands that use organic and regenerative means of bringing their products to market. So I'd love for you to talk for a moment about what you're doing differently in this space. I see the brand Nutiva today is also championing a lot of social causes and environmental causes. And so I'd just love to know how you see kind of this branded responsibility. Like when you're creating a product, how do you envision a future that can be regenerative in the
Yeah.
space of business?
Yeah. Well, just a little background. I founded Nativa in 1999. And we grew it. I was at the kind of the right place at the right time, grew it very rapidly, helped pioneer hemp foods, helped pioneer coconut. And then I stepped down as CEO, 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm actually don't really have much to do with the company anymore at this point. In terms of brands, I think, business can be a force for good.
Mhm.
Business can be part of the solution. It can be good for people. It can be good for the planet. It can be good for profits. And sometimes people pay attention only to profits, and then people and the planet suffer. And at the same time, sometimes people overly focus in business, sometimes just on the social side, and they forget about the bottom line, and then their business doesn't do so well.
Yeah,
Um,
it's, you're
yeah,
cutting off your nose to spite your
yeah,
face in that
yeah,
case.
yeah. And one thing I would say that was for me, that I think was successful, that I think I did well. There were some things I didn't do as well. We all learn when you're an entrepreneur. You have this journey, and you learn what you're good at, and some things, and you're not as good. And hopefully you surround you with people who can complement you there. But I really focused on the why, and culture. And then the why is, there's lots of people who can sell, cooking oil in a jar.
Mhm.
And if people thought that's what the business we were in, then, we wouldn't have much of a business. But,
It'd be a commodity essentially.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, um, as I ran the business, our goal was to revolutionize the way the world eats. And we did that in many ways. When we came to the city of Richmond, California, we put in a fruit tree orchard at every public school.
Hmm.
Uh, we helped fund the movie Kiss the Ground. We're the first $30,000 to fund that, and helped leverage that, and did a lot of different campaigns and things. So, and then the second thing we focused on was culture. And when I was initial startup, I just said, well, if I just work really hard and hire a few smart people, and have a good time, and we're going to do well. But then once I started getting above 10 or 15 people, I realized that the team and the culture was going to be so important. So,
Mhm.
um, and I kind of freaked out reading about books where entrepreneurs would show up, and there'd be a couple hundred people in the company. They walk around, they go, I don't even know who these people are. I don't know why they were hired. I certainly, and so I didn't want to see that happen. So we put a lot of focus on culture and really creating the right environment. Uh, so I think that's really important. But yeah, a brand can be an expression, hopefully of a better future, and a better possibility. Um, and if you're successful at that, it can be financially rewarding, but also you can make a difference in the world, and we need that more. I like to say today we need more green and a lot less washing.
Yeah, more a lot less washing.
Very common these days.
Totally agree. So let's talk more about your work with Kiss the Ground. Now, you mentioned briefly that it was with Nutiva that you were able to initially start that first $30,000 that would fund its beginnings, right?
Right.
So I'd like to know a little bit more about how that came to be. I understand Woody Harrelson ended up being the voice that narrated it. I've enjoyed the film on Netflix. I also know that there's a podcast of the same name. And so I'd just love for you to talk about your involvement and really what people can expect if they take the time to go and watch that film.
Yeah. Well, um, around around 2013 or 14, I saw a presentation by an old friend of mine and a kind of a mentor of me on the in the food space, Will Allen from Vermont, and his presentation showed that degenerative agriculture, industrial agriculture, was one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gas emissions,
Mhm.
um, and that it was making making huge huge impacts in the environment negatively, and that we could shift how we grow food in a regenerative manner and return that instead of being a net emitter of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions and all the potential problems with fertilizers, we could be part of the solution through soil health. And that I had known some of those things individually or the concept, but I'd never seen it all put together. And I was literally for the next 6 months, I walked around a bit stunned, like, how is it that the climate movement, how is it that every major environmental organization, how is it even that the organic farming movement and the natural food industry has no interest in soil health, has no interest in organic regenerative farming as a solution for climate change? I was just like, am I in some strange reality where it seems so obvious? Like in 2014, we saw the signs of potential erratic weather,
Mhm.
the CO2 levels, from burning fossil fuels and et cetera. So after a while I decided I just do a film.
Right.
So we started on that film, and so I was like, okay, I got to meet the filmmaker. So I went on a journey to find him, filmmaker, and I met Josh and Rebecca from Ojai, and they took the ball and ran with it in an amazing way, and farther than I could have even imagined. And
Wow.
it was great to support them, and Woody did a great job on the narration, and but it took like 6 years to do the film, and it almost it almost didn't work, but you know, yeah. So I'm pretty pleased. A lot of people have seen it, and there's a new film out called Common Ground that's going to come
Mhm.
out this next year. That's going to be, and the filmmakers, have reminded me. They said, John, this is going to be, it's not going to be quite so nice. It's not going to be quite so optimistic. It's going to be, you know, I mean, we've lost 75% of all winged insects.
Yes.
you know, we've lost, and that's from industrial agriculture. We've lost 60% of the plankton in the ocean,
Mhm.
um, and and both the insects and the plankton we're losing 1 to 2% a year. So we really need to kind of woke up from this nightmare of destroying nature. And the irony is that the power structure and thing people need to understand, food is a bigger industry than the internet.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's big food, it's big pharma.
yeah. And big food and big pharma, their number one tool is essentially mind control and essentially, black hat PR,
Mhm.
and so they have lots of diversions. The most effective diversion they've made in the last 5 years is they've invented an entire new term for destroying the planet of a category of foods, of industrial foods, spraying pesticides made of GMOs, destroying soils, killing all sorts of wildlife, and they've come up with this word called plant-based.
Hmm.
it's one of the most brilliant things that Monsanto and Bayer and World Bank and Bill Gates and Al Gore and you just go on down the list have come up with, and people believe it. Now, back in the day, I remember old school vegans were like, and they were a lot of my customers. They're like, yeah, we want healthy organic food, and we don't want we don't want to harm any animals, and and we want it to taste good, and we want it to be full of nutrients, and we don't want any Monsanto chemicals. But
But now they're eating the Impossible Burger made
yeah,
with
now they're in the
highly
impossible,
processed foods.
and and they've lied so well that even the most hardcore vegans,
Mhm.
with rare exceptions, will never say one bad word about impossible. It's like they're a member of the card-carrying member of the Communist Party, and to say anything would be considered, well, it ends justify the means. And so, and I'll give you an example of the misinformation. So, and this is now spread, and I'll give you an example. In the last 3 years, how many times has the New York Times or the Guardian or Bloomberg said that cows and methane are causing problems for the planet?
Oh, it's all over the
Yes,
news
it's all in the news.
constantly.
Now, when is the last time those same publications said that the emissions from synthetic chemical fertilizer plants um, um, are is the fastest growing greenhouse gas emission, and is very toxic, and is very bad for our environment? They never mention it. And the thing is about the methane for the cows, the thing is it's really just a diversion. The life of methane is around 10 to 12 years.
Mhm.
So after the cow, releases methane, in the same way with buffalo, and same way with antelopes, and and deer, and other animals all over the world. And there was no problem with methane from buffaloes, 150 years
And
ago.
we had so many more of
We
them.
had so many, and they were much bigger than cows.
Mhm.
So so it's really a misdirection. And
Well,
so
I think that people they negate the fact that a cow actually creates healthy soil. So this very closely connects to your work with Kiss the Ground. I abut an open space preserve, my home in Scotts Valley, right? That space preserve, they have essentially regenerative farming cows. The cows have to be on the land because they need rudiments. The rudiments leave behind their manure, right? Which regenerates the soil. They're rotated between many, many pastures. And the reason we need rudiments is because it's an open space preserve. They're working to preserve a species of grass, also a beetle who hunts by sight, and a salamander. And the cow is actually incredibly effective at helping to maintain the ecosystem so that all of these species can thrive. So it's a regenerative approach. These cows, yes, they're producing some methane, but they're eating fresh grass. They're eating grass that's growing out of the ground as opposed to something else. And so ultimately, that means that long term, they're healthier, the soil is healthier, the environment, the ecosystem that they support is healthier. And this is a way we can head forward. And you cover this in Kiss the Ground.
exactly.
I was falling in love with some of these farmers who are taking on the mantle and taking the risks and then showcasing over the course of 5 years that their land was holding more water, that they were able to produce the same sort of product, but without ultimately sacrificing their entire harvest because there was a drought. So, I mean, these are things that we need to think about. I've recently seen that Sadhguru, who is he's an incredible thought leader in the spiritual
Right.
space. He's got all over his Twitter feed. His entire banner is about saving soil.
Yeah, soil health. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. He's I actually visited his ashram when I went to India, when I was hunting for coconuts, and
I
amazing.
venture to guess you had an effect on him
Yeah,
deciding to take this on.
yeah. I never met him before, but I've heard him speak a couple times. But yeah, he's quite interesting character, and big fan of soil health. I'll give you an example of one of the powers of hoofed animals, and it's not just cows. It's sheep, it's buffalo. So if you look at the area of the Chihuahua Desert in North Mexico, and then you look at vast parts of New Mexico, uh, parts of Arizona, parts of West Texas. This used to be, an area full of grass, you know, seasonal creeks,
Hmm.
lots of wildlife. And over the last 100 years, we've turned it into a moonscape by overgrazing, poor management. And people go, oh, see, cows are bad. So the cows have, they've overgrazed it. And so what there's a gentleman over there named Alejandro Carrillo. And matter of fact, he's going to be one of the stars in the new film Common Ground that's going to come out this next year. That's a follow-up to Kiss the Ground. So his dad called him up 10 years ago and said, you need to come, son, you need to come back to the ranch, 25,000 acres. And they only had a couple hundred cows. They had to bring in supplemental hay each year during the summertime.
Hmm.
And things were not good. So he started studying. He met some people, and they basically now have a regenerative model where they'll bunch the cows all together very tightly, very tightly, and then this way that the cows stomp, they leave their manure, etc., and then they don't come back for another year to 14 months.
Hmm.
What this does is it takes the grass. When they come back, the grass might could be a couple feet tall or foot tall, depending. In some cases now it used to be only a few inches, and now it's several feet. Yeah, and so they'll eat down like 2/3 of the grass, and then that other third will stay, and they won't come back. And then this way the grass puts its energy in the root system. If it's continuously grazing, it causes issues. Then he got his neighbors to do it, and they have over 100,000 acres in their area.
Hmm.
Now, recently what happened, some neighbors in the distance got upset with them, and they said, you're stealing the rain.
How?
Because when the rain clouds come over, they come over this land of this 100,000 acres and drop the rain, because there's
Mhm.
a symbiotic relationship between rain
Right.
clouds and the small water cycle and the grasses and vegetation. And so there's this intimate connection there.
I mean,
And
this is something that gave me the chills when I first learned it. It was the evaporative microbes that
yeah,
are in
yeah,
the actual evaporating
yeah,
water
yeah,
send signal to the rain clouds to release water.
yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. And we should really, the most important gas that impacts climate is not carbon. But you see, we're microscopic, narrow casting only on carbon. Carbon is bad. Carbon is this, carbon is that. And we forget about the water cycle. We forget about water vapors. That's what's driving these massive amounts of rainstorms and things. So um,
Mhm.
by working with the living root in regeneration, we can take that excess water and store it in the ground, because healthy soil is like a sponge, so we can bring that water back. But the reality is, again, people, it's easy. Brainwashing is very effective. Like Hitler showed is very effective.
Mhm.
And today people have been brainwashed, especially people in the urban and liberal people. They're convinced that the enemy is cows and oil drilling.
Mhm.
And just saying that, people freak out. Oh, you're denying climate change. Oh, it's like, no, drilling for burning oil and coal obviously causes pollution, and we need less pollution. But the reason why we're having many of these problems, a big portion of that is this excess water. So if through regeneration, not only can we can help the water cycle, but we also fix the carbon cycle at the same time.
Right. Because the root system can sequester carbon, because the forests themselves can go ahead and actually sequester carbon and give us food and other resources as well, like oxygen.
Right.
But there isn't enough space that's been essentially allowed to regenerate. You talk about overgrazing of land. that is this perception we have of even farming with animals, that we would let them graze until all
Yeah.
that's left is the roots, and not enough is left to ultimately sequester the carbon that the grass would otherwise be capable of doing. Now, I've read Paul Hawken's Regeneration from cover to cover, and on my other podcast, Care More Be Better, I actually went through a deep dive chapter by chapter. And by doing that, I learned the information a lot more effectively. I was surprised to learn about the small water cycle itself and its impact on where water goes and where it doesn't. I also really found that one of those key elements that you're speaking of in a piece you wrote, of how our waterways are effective, ultimately wanting to turn our waterways blue again. So
Right.
I'd like you to invite you to talk
Yeah.
about this, because it's not just how we use water, it's also how we farm with it. And then it's also the pesticides and the fertilizers and all of these things that we've grown used to using, which impact the clarity of the water that is in our riverbeds that ultimately feeds our water tables.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I wrote an article called "Make America's Rivers Blue Again" last year. Published that in Substack. And one thing before I get into that article, I want to go back to the Alejandro Carrillo, the cow whisperer
Mm.
from Chihuahuan Desert. Now, whereas Dad used to have 200, 250 cows, he now has 650 cows
Wow.
and donkeys and sheep, and he really could use a couple hundred more. So he's increased the capacity for cows on the land by 4x.
Hmm.
Some radical vegan says those are magical cows. Those can't be, like, so they're just convinced that see the story that's Monsanto is told, that the vegetarian community, not all, there's plenty of vegetarians that, vegans that I know that are supportive of regenerative agriculture, whether it's plant-based or animal-based. But a lot of falling for this is basically, how do we feed 9 billion people? We don't
Mhm.
have enough land, and we're running out of land. And so we need to get rid of all the cows, and do these giant steel vats to make cultured food, kind of a Soylent Green, that have, and we need 500,000 times more of the capacity that we have for culturing, and fermenting, foods and liquids today. So where's all that steel going to come from? And then you have to plug it into a socket. And one of the things that that's going into this article, and it's just for people to understand, regeneration runs on today's sunlight. So the sun shines, it through photosynthesis, it drives plants,
Mhm.
and plants and animal cycle. And you can, so that Chihuahuan rancher, all that beef was grown. There was no pesticides, there was no chemicals, there was no steel blackened tank that they had to, plug in and grow this for, for weeks at a time. Um, Whereas degenerative agriculture runs on yesterday's sunlight.
Mhm.
Which is basically, plants and animals that decompose into petrochemicals, and oil that they process into petrochemicals. So which one do we want to run on? Today's sunlight or yesterday's sunlight? And the irony is that people have hijacked, the vegan movement, and they want to run on yesterday's sunlight. And anything that runs on today's sunlight that involves animals is evil and bad.
Mhm.
um, and the amount of, and so it is an irony. So in this article, essentially 150, 100 200 years ago, the rivers are blue. They're technically not blue, but reflection from the light,
They
gives it a
reflect the
blue
sky.
hue.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then in the 1960s and 70s, the rivers were catching on fire, even in Ohio.
Mhm.
Brown, gray, from water, from soil washing away, from chemical fertilizers, pesticides, manure lagoons from
Mhm.
CAFOs, confined animal feedlots, which are not regenerative, they're degenerative. Um, and so then we said, well, let's clean up industrial waste, but they gave agriculture a pass. So these rivers, we've changed the color of the rivers. And when we apply the synthetic fertilizer, which is from fracked natural gas, and then it's injected into the ground, and then when it rains, that washes off, and it washes off from the farm to a little creek, and then creek to a bigger creek, and then to a river, and then to the ocean. So it's discoloring all of that. And regenerative agriculture, restores our waterways, and degenerative agriculture
Strips it away.
strips it away. The other interesting thing, like here in California, the leading professors and people who are well-meaning, they think that we should have less plant growth in the Sierras because that would absorb more water. And then, so then there wouldn't be as much water for the San Joaquin Valley. We're running out of water. We should be restoring the watersheds in the Sierras right now. That's what Gavin Newsom and the leadership there. Unfortunately, they're not that innovative. And there are people who are in the team that are working on that, but it's so bureaucratic. And then we can also slow, the key with water flow on land is to slow it, spread it, and sink it. This is what beavers do. So if we did this in the Sierras and through small check dams and reintroducing beaver, and if you spend $1 billion or $2 billion, we could do phenomenal things. But we're so locked into bringing water from distant areas.
The Colorado River as the primary example.
And people don't know this, but California will not be growing winter vegetables next year.
It's a big deal because we actually produce more food than I think almost any other state.
Yeah. So in the Imperial Valley, they're not going to get access to the river water, next year. But there are farmers and ranchers who are working. I went to a regenerative almond field day in the central Valley this past February, and it actually really inspired me. There was a lot of farmers and ranchers using cover crops, using animals growing between, grazing in between almond orchards, regenerating the soil. And the heads of the California Almond Board was there, some of the board members and the president, and met a lot of really interesting people. So we can do this, but we need to focus on it. And right now, unfortunately, today, there's a lot more washing, a lot less green when it comes to where we're focused on. And the irony, as I mentioned before, most environmental organizations do not understand ecology. They don't understand natural systems. And they're usually even afraid to talk to people who know anything about it. They just want to blame cows and oil companies. But the thing is, they're paid by Wall Street and wealthy foundations who have portfolios full of Bayer and Monsanto and Exxon and Pharma.
Yeah.
And so they've essentially, most every major environmental organization is captured. Like, it's so bizarre. And they parrot this: cows are bad. And, they never talk about the biodiversity collapse of insects and birds. They all focus on wolves and things. So I've called them out in different articles, especially the Sierra Club and 350.org. I think 350.org, which is a well-known, they're nice, they're good people. I've talked to them, but when you talk to them, it's like, is there anybody there? They should just call themselves, 450.org. Because that's what the environmental organization, their plan is to move us to 450.
I don't know what that is. What is 450?
It's like we're at 420 parts per million.
Oh, right.
The CO2, and we used to be at 410, and now we're going to 422. So the plan that they said is oil and gas is bad, oil and coal, don't drill, and solar and wind and EVs are good. End of subject. That's what the climate movement in the United States and Europe has said for decades.
Yeah,
And
oil
yeah,
bad
yeah, and
and green
yeah,
energy good,
yeah,
basically.
and and maybe they'll say a little, yeah, we should protect forests and stuff, and they'll have all sorts of things. But if you really look, that's what they've said, and how many environmental organizations are going, don't buy a second car, get a bicycle. You know, why did the Biden administration and the Democratic Party just pass unanimous, from their vote to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on solar and wind and electric cars, and then they took out the $10 billion for electric bikes? I mean, like, electric bikes are a phenomenal way for transportation, especially whether it's rural or urban. People, especially old people, a little older, like, it's it's a great way, saves energy, and we hardly even focus on it. It's all back to, you know, just, promote, and not that solar and wind isn't good. I mean, we need to do more of that, but the amount, and the other irony is when you actually look and see how much minerals, rare minerals we need, whether it's copper or cobalt or lithium, to power solar and wind and electric cars, and they're working on some things that don't involve lithium, and graphene
Mhm.
and graphite and other things. But still, we're going to need a lot of these minerals. We don't have enough minerals. We have 20% of the amount of copper that we're going to need in the next 20 years, and it takes 7 to 14 years. So they never even bothered to calculate that.
Right.
So, like, they have these announcements. It's like, state of California, Gavin Newsom said, and, I've met Gavin, and, actually raised money for him, because I knew he was going to become governor, and I spent time with him and others, that in experts, can kiss the ground about regenerative agriculture. And so he's been doing some good things for agriculture, compared to most Democrats, which don't always, they're more focused on other issues. But he said, we're not going to allow, any gas, powered cars to be sold by 2035. And then 5 days later, they told people, don't plug in, no EV, because we have a shortage of energy. Don't plug in your
Right.
cars.
Well, I live here in Santa Cruz County,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we've seen it happen where essentially PG&E has said, we have enough energy for air conditioning or electric cars, but not both.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
And that's grid problems that we're ultimately going to work through, but the reality is that we're far behind where we need to be.
yeah,
And there now are plans to both melt permafrost to get at rare earth minerals, and the most recent proposal I saw was drilling into our seabeds to get at rare earth minerals. I'm always an advocate for the ocean. I
yeah,
worry about the fallout when we start to approach
yeah,
undertakings like that
yes,
are
yeah,
vast and destructive to the seafloor, and ultimately think that we have to come up with something better. Like, don't we have enough bright minds working on this to
yeah.
ultimately come up with a better solution than melting permafrost and drilling into seabeds?
Yes, yeah. It's we need to reduce our lifestyle and our consumption, but that's not what the Sierra Club or 350.org, Environmental Defense Fund, or
Mhm.
NRDC, or all these groups. That's not what they tell people in newsletters. Matter of fact, one environmental group was Sierra Club, like 7,000 people watched it, and they said they watched our film. They were blown away. They said, we've never heard the idea of this. They'd never heard how many newsletters the Sierra Club sent out, you know? So it's like, and it's not like the Sierra Club's a bad group. They're just in this group think, and I worked with them, to protect California redwood forests, 30 years ago, and worked closely with them. And they were one of the groups that didn't sell out, But, there's also groups like National Audubon, which is actually working with ranchers, and they started up a program. And um, there's this really cool African American gentleman that works with ranchers in the Midwest, and he's really created this whole program for Audubon initially. So there's people doing some good things there, but we definitely need to do some things. Let's talk about oceans for a bit. I'm a big fan of healthy oceans, and love the oceans. And I wrote an article about the fact that um, we have, Houston, we have a problem, our, ocean acidification. It's because all this excess carbon is going in the oceans and it's becoming acidic. And the plankton, the microscopic plankton, their skeletal structure is dissolving. And if we fast forward into what the carbon level is going to be at the current rate by 2035,
Hmm.
there's no there's no plankton in the ocean at that point. And so instead of burning fuels to make plastics, we can make here as a straw from Lollyware, a company that I know the founder, um, C. Bergani, amazing company. And this is made out of kelp and it composts. And so this is a new thing made out, and they can also make other plastics. So they're working on this. Um, um, there's another company called Primary Ocean that is working with giant kelp that grows here on the West Coast, and turning that into fertilizer to feed the
Hmm.
soil. So we need to learn to reforest the oceans. We've lost 99% of the kelp forests in California, in Oregon and Washington in the
And that's
last.
largely because of biodiversity loss, right? And
Yeah,
the shrinking territory of the sea otter, because the sea
exactly.
otter eats the
Yes,
urchins, and then you can have ultimately the seaweed can reattach to the seafloor and expand its reach. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but more than 50% of the oxygen we breathe comes from algae and kelp. So
right.
all these species of macroalgae and
Yeah,
microalgae that are growing around the
yeah,
planet,
yeah, yeah,
they
definitely.
give us our oxygen.
Yeah,
They're
we need to
critically
grow more of
important.
it, and the Department of Energy put out a grant to look at where's the optimal place to grow more kelp, through kelp farming. So that's starting to go on here in the West Coast.
Mhm,
And the other thing is by removing urchins, and there's a group called the Watermen's Alliance, and they're removing urchins and getting the kelp to come back much more, and bringing the abalone back. So just there's literally in Sonoma County alone, there's a
mhm.
billion urchins.
Mhm. Yeah, and in Santa Barbara, I mean, I've been a scuba diver for most of my adult life, and I've dove all over California from, Monterey Bay all the way south into Mexico, and ultimately find that, for instance, you'll see these explosions of the purple urchin all along the
Right,
coast of Santa Barbara area, and also sea hares, like a ton of sea hares, but it looks like barren. There isn't much life there anymore because of this explosion of the purple urchin in particular. And so, what they're also conceiving is if they reintroduce the otter in these pockets, they may even be able to restore the kelp forest off the coast of Oregon to its once thriving conditions, because even there's
right.
been loss because it's the shrinkage of the territory of the
Yeah,
sea otter who loves to eat those purple
yeah,
urchins.
yeah. They were hunted, especially the Russians. Started to
Yeah.
hunt those back in the 1840s and 50s for the pelt. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely need to take care of the ocean more. I want to talk a little about our agroforestry projects.
Right on. That
Um,
was next on my
yeah,
list.
yeah,
I understand that you're doing some incredible work in the global south, planting food forests, which is
yes,
a topic I love. So
yes,
yes, please
yeah.
talk to us about that.
Yeah, a little over a year ago, with my co-founder Hannah Eckberg, from the Abundant Earth Foundation, we formed agroforestry regeneration communities, and we're a network of community-based agroforestry, putting in food forests. And food forests it's a very simple way, using a variety of, such as basically nitrogen fixing trees, which essentially it's like having it's your own factory of nitrogen, but it's in nature. So it replaces bags of fertilizer with green leaves, and
Mhm,
and so we plant those, and then other fruit trees and other crops. So our work is in Guatemala, and then also in East Africa, and our project in Guatemala is with the contour lines. If anybody's going to Antigua, Guatemala, they have a center we've opened there, and not only are we growing, like we give farmers, we work with the very smallest farmers, people who have, they have dirt floors. Many of them don't have bank accounts, and people who've been essentially ignored and demonized and basically really harassed for the last 300 years through colonialist and now neo-colonialist policies. And they're so grateful when they learn that someone wants to work with them. And these the really I'm the person who really helps kind of bring some resources and some best practices and introduce people together. We were recently able to get a $400,000 grant from One Tree Planted to do this work. So in Guatemala, and we train them. We also do row crops in between, alley crops. So between the nitrogen fixing trees and the avocados and fruit trees and mangoes and citrus, we'll grow cassava and ginger and turmeric and pineapple, sugarcane. And with the cassava, we've turned that into a flour now. And so we're making a gluten-free like jackfruit pizzas in Antigua. So people
Wasn't cassava the root of tapioca? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Tapioca is from cassava. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cassava is one of the most important crops in the world, and we also grow a lot of that in Malawi. So we have a project we've been supporting in Malawi is growing very rapidly with the Permaculture Paradise Institute, and they're located in central Malawi, and we've trained over 1,200 farmers in 5 days around permaculture and agroforestry. We just trained 65 this week, and a good portion are women. And a lot of these farmers there, ironically, whether it's in Guatemala or in Malawi, their main crop they grow is maize, and they don't grow anything else. Just that's it.
Corn.
And so we take them, instead of doing that we introduce agroforestry, or we also say, well, if you're still going to grow a bunch of maize, just plant Glitteria, which is a nitrogen fixing tree, our fertilizer tree, without running on today's sunlight, not yesterday's sunlight. And we plant it every 5 meters. And so they have a big corn crop, and then before they're going to plant the corn the next season, they just coppice it, chop it a bit. All those leaves are high nitrogen, powers the corn. Then as the corn grows up, then the tree grows and it gives it some partial shade, which is very helpful. And then one of the things we do is we tell all the farmers. A lot of these farmers they have outdoor showers. They sometimes will carry water a mile away just to get it, or two. And we plant banana trees, so the excess, the water from the gray water from the showers grows, banana trees. We've recently expanded to southern Malawi. Malawi has 18 million people. It's just kind of interesting. Both Malawi and Guatemala have 18 or 19 million people. The number one crop they grow is maize. They've both been pressured by from the federal government, from the United States, from the IMF, from the World Bank, from the United Nations to use chemical fertilizers, from Bill Gates, from this World Economic Forum. You just go down all these, these letters supported by environmental groups. Environmental groups are attacking cows, not dealing with the chemical fertilizers, trying to deal with first world problems, but not dealing with the fact that there's 500 million smallholder farmers. And, we can then, both those countries then can just transition to agroforestry, working with nature. So we've expanded that program. When there's a drought, they get much better yields. And remember, these farmers, they're one harvest away from starvation. Whereas those of us, who are in first world countries like the US or, Europe, we're 10 harvests away from starvation. We just don't know it yet. For many, not everyone, but, there's going to be people who are going to, you can only destroy our soils. The number one export of the United States by tonnage is topsoil.
Wow.
Billions of tons a
Wow.
year. So we're expanding, but just kind of give people, order. So, we need to help our soil here, but we also need to help in the global South, because our lifestyle, our wealthy lifestyle, we can get on planes and have iPhones and things, is because we've been taking resources from the global South. So those of us in the global North can live this kind of 100-year blowout of material resources on the planet. But we're going back to Malawi for a moment. We found, I met this Irish aid worker who has been working in Malawi, and he's on an island called Chissy Island, and there's 4,000 people in this island. It's a remote island on the second largest lake in Malawi, in the southern Malawi. There's, leopards, there's monkeys, and he's really committed to helping the people in education and better food systems. So I was kind of inspired by what he was going to do. I said, let's help. And so we took two of their people, a man and a woman, and some of them had never, one of them I don't think had ever left the island. We took them 300 miles away by bus. Strange place, still in their country, taught them all about permaculture, and now we're now going to recruit 20 more. And they told all their friends, and we visited, and the chief said, yeah, we like this. And it's very remote, and the average income is, barely a couple $100 a year. And so we're going to teach them about permaculture and agroforestry. We're going to do a program for their kids. And then interestingly, somebody from Switzerland, an NGO, reached out to us and says, we've identified Malawi as a country we want to focus on education, and we really like what you're doing. I just talked to them. So we're looking at teaching the kids there about how to grow trees and provide them trees and plant. And we're going to do the same with the Permaculture Paradise Institute. I asked where in central Malawi, where we've taught 1,200 farmers, I said, if you drew a circle 30 kilometers out, about 12 miles, just in a circle, what percentage of the farmers will have taken your training? And Mr. Biswick said 5%. He said or a little more, by the end of this year, it'll be 10%. So 10% of the farmers, and most of them, when they take the class, the 5-day class training, then they agreed to train 9 other farmers. So this week we trained 65 farmers, which means we're going to have 650 farmers. And then we have extension agents that go around and teach these people.
Well, and I think one of the things that we don't, understand enough out here in the West is that going from a monocropping to an agroforestry method will ultimately mean that they're harvesting around the year some sort of a crop, which then protects them. Not only do they get more nutrients that are available in their local diets, but if one crop fails, they've got 7 or 8 others, right?
Yeah. They've been stunted, their growth. And remember, these policies, who makes the loans to the governments? Who goes to Africa and says that they should be using chemical fertilizers? Bill Gates. Who funds all of this? USAID. Americans are in denial of, these are crimes against humanity. These are not good things. And yet we hide under the banner of,
we're doing good.
I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
When Donald Trump's president, I'm a Republican. We wouldn't do that. Where is the ability just to see with open eyes and information? But we've become so tribal, so
Us versus
disconnected
them,
from
and
reality.
it's just,
But the nutrition is so much better. One of the, they're planting, we're planting over in Malawi, yams and cassavas. Also, there's all sorts of native fruits and berries, and that most of them have disappeared. So when they just fence it off, so the animals don't come and eat it, they get all this fruit back. And they're amazing. They don't even have to plant it. It just comes back. So when he brings people through the site, it's amazing. And so it's been really great. And really what my role is I just find these change agents. So, and we back a bunch of them, and then some of them it just doesn't, they end up not delivering, as much, but some have really, and so literally with $10 million, we could transform Guatemala. We could transform Malawi, and yet there's so few, we have so few organizations showing up. It's like I'm just one guy with some friends, and we're supporting on a small scale. And we've already planted 5,000 food forests. Our goal is to plant 100,000 food forests by 2027. And my buddy Malawi, he says he's going to do 100,000 food forests just in Malawi. So we definitely need more resources. We need more support. But we continue down the road, and I like to say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with many.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, if you look at a forest, are there bears spreading synthetic fertilizers in the forest? Is a forest dynamic? Does it grow very well? Is there irrigation in forests? So literally, that's when we tell farmers, we're going to model the forest. And we literally grow water. We plant, even if we can take areas that are dry, destitute, the soil's washing away. We don't plant trees right there, right at the start. We plant, grasses and other shrubs. And then over time, it starts to bring back the water. So we can regenerate the earth. We can make it truly the garden. The question is, can we navigate the greatest distance in the world? As one indigenous elder told me from Greenland once, he said, John, the greatest distance in the world is between humanity's heart and humanity's brain. And that's really where we're at today. Yeah. We have all the solutions that are available for us. And some we still need to work on, but we really need to work on just being open. And I constantly learn what I thought was true 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe wasn't. I had to go, maybe I was wrong.
I mean, isn't that the truth?
Listen.
You have to
Maybe
learn.
I could listen. Maybe I could listen.
Yeah.
I see so many millennials lecture me. I've been at this for 40 years, and they're lecturing me, and they've never been to a farm and a ranch. We literally have experts all over the United States and Europe in food, and they never go to visit farms and ranches. And they're the ones, they're the ones that convinced the Biden administration to give $2 billion for fake cellular meat and nothing for the ranchers.
Right.
Small ranchers.
So we could talk about that on a whole different podcast where we talk about the crazy ideas coming out of Silicon Valley, like air protein made by microbes, or chicken grown in a petri dish. And so much money is going to these ideas, which are ultimately, it's another iteration of an extractive view on how we build things, and reductionist as opposed to collaborative. We're not regenerating our systems. We're creating some new microcosmic tool that is attractive to investors, but which may not do anything of what it's originally intended, and could have consequences that we haven't really thought through yet.
No, you're right. I'll give you an example. We'll just wrap this up in here. Is Beyond Meat. Mm-hmm. They don't even include transportation in their cost of goods. They have negative margins. Their cost of goods is twice what it costs for regular meat. They have less than 6 quarters of cash. They're likely to be delisted from the stock market and basically sold off or bankrupt, but they owe $1 billion. So it's going to go into bankruptcy court. So that's going to be an example. Most companies have been funded by Wall Street and Silicon Valley in the fake meat space will close their doors in 2024 because they just lose money. It was all a boondoggle, we need to get real. We need to, and what people can do individually. How many people have lawns? How many people have yards? Mm-hmm. And they're spraying all sorts of chemicals. I'm actually working right now, in how to make biological fertilizers and biostimulants plant food for homes. And that's a new enterprise that I'm working on right now. So I'm kind of in the R&D process, talking to people all over. But so literally people can take care of, and you can grow some veggies, some herbs on your deck inside your house.
Hmm.
Go to the farmer's market. Um, Another thing that's important to do for your own personal health is do the plank. I really recommend everybody, if they'll just do the yoga plank every day for 30 seconds, you'll be amazing what will happen 30 to 60 days. Now, some people have a yoga practice, but walking is really good, but the
Just
yoga.
to describe what a plank is for somebody
Yeah,
who doesn't know. I mean, I know with a plank,
yeah.
I
I
use
would
my
suggest, yeah, it's like you're on the ground, laying on the ground, and you're up on your elbows, like in the prayer position.
mhm. And it's
And
basically like a push-up, but you're static. You're
yeah,
just staying
yeah.
in place.
And I've had people lose 10 pounds in 6 weeks doing that.
I've
Um,
heard stories of improved digestion
yeah,
specifically
yeah,
only from that
definitely
one
very good.
act,
And
right?
then the other thing I want to say is I got a call from a gentleman, Mr. Beelman, I think. He's been researching mushrooms for 50 years. And
Mhm,
one of the things they found is there's a rare amino acid called ergothion or ergothion, I think.
mhm.
They call it ERGO is kind of a shorthand. And turns out that um, it has a huge impact on our health. And in agriculture, regenerative crops grown without tilling have a much higher level than degenerative or even organic.
Okay.
And that the American consumption is one-fifth the level of what it is in Italy and in Japan. And mushrooms and miso are really good sources of it. And not the button mushrooms, but like the shiitake mushrooms and oyster mushrooms and lion's mane. So that's a simple thing, is just learning about that and eating more regenerative foods, eating more mushrooms, and of course, omega 3s. Nutiva helped pioneer, hemp seed and hemp oil, and I know you're active in that. And omega
Mhm.
3s are such an important thing in our diet. So
Right. Well, we dove deeply into the story of rice with the founders of Lotus Foods and their regenerative agricultural certified products,
they're
right?
friends of mine. Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
So really, they got to talk about the fact that the rice that is grown this way has more phytonutrients, nuttier, richer flavor. The
Yes.
varietals are able to grow with less water, giving more crop per drop. I mean, all of that plays in to your nutrition profile. I also like to point out specifically with mushrooms, there is research that shows that just putting your mushrooms out in the sun, direct sunlight, for just a few minutes actually increases their levels of vitamin D. So it's another way to get healthy vitamin D3 into your system, which is, of course, immunoprotective, very healthy for you. And of course, to your point, doing things like consuming an omega 3 supplement like those produced by Orlo Nutrition every day supports your long term health, supports your gut health, your brain health. I mean, we don't get enough of the healthy fats here in the West. We need to rebuild how we eat, what we consume, support those regenerative agriculture movements that are around the globe taking on big systems. I mean, we have to talk about it more. We ultimately have to commence this conversation, recommence it over and over as we're sitting here battling over what to do with the Colorado River and how much alfalfa is going to be able to be grown this year because it's such a water hog, which then, of course, impacts farming and
Right.
available resources there. So,
Mhm.
I mean, these are complex systems. Water use is an immense issue. Regenerative agriculture is part of the solution because you can get more water to stay in the soil so plants can grow. I mean, this is a no brainer, right?
Yeah. Health begins in the soil, and with healthy soil leads to healthy
That's right.
plants, healthy animals, healthy people, healthy climate, healthy ocean.
Wow. It's all connected. I mean, we are living in an ecosystem. We have to stop thinking about it like just the inputs and controls. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, John. This has been my absolute pleasure.
Great to be here, Karina, and thank you for what you do in the world. And it's let's regenerate.
Let's regenerate. So, as we think about today's discussion, I want to invite you to do a couple of things. For one, I think everyone should go and watch that film, Kiss the Ground, on Netflix. It is somewhat entertaining, also just highly educational. You'll find yourself thinking about what you can do differently and even supporting those local farmers in your communities, going to the grocers, Sure, but perhaps going to that farmer's market first. To find out more about John and his work, you can always reach out to me directly via orlonutrition.com. We will have complete show notes there. And also, what I will counsel you to do is check out our show notes. I'm going to include direct links to John's work with all of the many not-for-profits that he's involved with in this agroforestry space, and also with regenerative agriculture. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you have questions, please reach out via social channels at Orlo Nutrition or send me an email directly to hello@orlonutrition.com. As we close today's show, I hope you'll raise a cup of your favorite beverage with me as I say my closing words. Here's to your health.
Thanks for listening to Nutrition Without Compromise. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to learn more, visit orlonutrition.com and join our mailing list. You'll gain access to complete show notes, features, and informative blogs, because nutrition shouldn't be an either-or.